Hey everybody, Ron Bielefeld, Whistling Wings Photography. I'm actually on my boat this morning with some good client friends of mine, and we're out hoping to get some really great pictures of swallowtail kites. And it's one of the tours I do every year in July. But as in other videos, this video is not about the tour, it's about two lenses. The 600 f4 Mark II with a 1.4 times teleconverter on it, and Canon's new RF 800 f11. And what I'm wanting to do in this video is give you a comparison of the two, 840 millimeters versus 800 millimeters. Show you some of the things I like and dislike about both lenses as far as the images you can capture, and some of the drawbacks of the f11 and the 600. And maybe convince you that the f11 isn't so much of a handicap as you thought it might be. So if you're interested in hearing more, stay tuned. Hey everybody, Ron Bielefeld. Welcome to another video. In this video, like I said in the introduction, I want to do a comparison between the 600 f4 with the 1.4 times teleconverter on it at 840 millimeters to Canon's new RF 800 f11, a lens which I've had for a while now and have been doing a lot of shooting with it. And the most recent was for some swallowtail kites. I've done quite a few tours with the kites, and I've taken that opportunity to have one of my R5s with the 600 with the 1.4 on it, and my other R5 with the 800 f11 on it, and shooting, basically switching off. So it's very similar scenarios, very similar light, and taking a look at what the two lenses can produce with the R5, how they perform. And you know, I'll tell you, I continue to be really impressed with the 800 f11. Now, some of you are going to say, well, what kind of comparison can this really be? You're comparing a $13,000 lens to a less than $1,000 lens. So cost, there's really no comparison there. Absolutely not. So the whole value, I think, of this comparison is so that people can see what a less than $1,000 lens that costs less than $1,000 can do 800 millimeters compared to what a $13,000 lens plus a $500 teleconverter, the 1.4 on there, can do on a camera like the R5. And they can see what, you know, in a way, what that $13,000 buys versus $1,000. And I'll tell you, I'll cut to the quick right here. I don't hesitate picking up the 800 f11. Now, a lot of what we were doing with the kites is action photography. They're flying, they're coming down, skimming on the water, and getting a drink of water in the morning before they go out to feed. And so for the action stuff, you know, you'd think, well, the 800 f11 is going to have a disadvantage at f11 if there's poor light. Not going to be able to get your shutter speeds up, and that's absolutely true. That's one of the big advantages and why a lot of people buy a 600 f4 or 500 f4 is because you can shoot in low light. But for static subjects, perched kites, really that advantage of the 600 f4 goes away. You don't need fast shutter speeds for these birds when they're perched. And with the IBIS IS in both of these lenses, including the 800 f11, which is very good at stabilizing static shots, you can shoot at slow shutter speeds, keep your ISOs down, and still get very nice sharp images of static subjects. So, you know, let's just go through this comparison really quickly and start out talking about the liability that a lot of people think of first with that 800 f11, the speed, the relatively slow speed of that lens, It's f11, nothing else. Can't be less, can't be more, can't stop down. So, they're thinking, man, that's a big liability. Well, like I just alluded to, with the cameras now, with the IBIS stabilization for static subjects, moving subjects, if that's what you do most, you're going to find that the liability of that f11 is a lot less than you think. When you look at the overall image quality, you start taking a look at the images you get, that you can get with the 800 f11 versus the 600 f4, you're going to have a hard time seeing a lot of difference there. Is there a difference? Absolutely. The 600 f4 is going to produce a little more micro contrast, I call it. Things are going to look a little bit sharper, a little more detail sometimes. But I'll tell you, when you consider the 800 f11's cost, the image quality is really, really good. If you want to talk about in more depth the IBIS IS performance of the two, the 800 f11's actually a little bit better, in my opinion, than what can be accomplished with the 600 with the 1.4 on there. Now, the weight, right, holding all that weight, I shoot a 600 f4 Mark II, so it's heavier than the Mark III that's available. It's going to be heavier, of course, than the RF 600 f4 that's going to be out shortly. It'll be about the same weight, maybe even just a tiny bit less than the EF version of the 600 Mark III. But having to hold that up and then the less image stabilization that you get versus the 800 f11 can make a difference. With static subjects, with flight shots, birds in flight, I'm shooting shutter speeds most of the time, almost all the time. I just turn IBIS IS off anyway. So there's really no advantage or disadvantage to either lens when you're shooting action shots, as far as I'm concerned, of the two lenses. So, IBIS is a factor. I think it's a little bit better on static images than on the 800 f11 than it is on the 600 f4 with the 1.4. You look at autofocus performance, quickness, accuracy, they're really, really similar. Can't really see a difference. If anything, the 800 f11 is a little bit quicker in cycling if you're way out of focus. Neither one of these lenses on the R5 is super fast in cycling from something that's way out of focus, bringing it into focus. It's not like a 1DX2 or 1DX3. If you're used to those kinds of reaction times by the autofocus, the motor's running much quicker at higher voltage with a camera like that. They're both relatively slow, and it's hard to really tell a difference between the two, for me anyway. If anything, the 800 f11's just a little bit quicker. What really comes down to the main difference for me, other than cost, with the 800 f11 versus the 600 f4 with the 1.4 is backgrounds and what you can do with backgrounds. If you have very close backgrounds behind your subject, you got a bird skimming the water or flying against a relatively close background, it's those smooth, creamy backgrounds separating the bird from the background that is so nice to be able to do with the 600 f4, even at f5.6 with the 1.4 times teleconverter on it. It's something you just can't achieve with the 800 f11. Now you're paying a premium to get that, but that's why so many people gravitate to these 600 f4s, other than the speed and being able to shoot at higher shutter speeds and low light, is to be able to get that background separation from your subject, in this case birds, in this case specifically swallowtail kites. It's very difficult to achieve that same look with the 800 f11 because you're just stuck at f11. Can it be done? Yes, it can, but the background has to be quite a ways behind your subject. The focus plane has to be way out in front of that background, or the background's going to have more detail than maybe you want it to have. Now, you can switch that around, and you're shooting at f5.6 with the 600 f4 and the 1.4 times teleconverter at 5.6, and you get focus on the bird's head, let's say, as it's skimming, and so the eye and the head and everything is sharp, but the bird's angled away from you. How much depth of field do you have there? how much more of the bird's actually going to be sharp. 800 f11, you have a little bit of an advantage there because you're going to have much more depth of field behind the focal plane and in front of it. You get the eye, you're going to get a lot more of the bird, if not all of it, actually in focus. It's going to be tough to do with a 600 at 5.6. Same distance away. Eye might be sharp, but that tail is going to be out of focus. Near wingtip, far wingtip might be more out of focus for sure. Now, that extra depth of field, when you're shooting against the water, let's say, if you look at some of these swallowtail kite images where the background really isn't in play, you're getting more of the bird in focus, the water around the bird, more of the water around the bird's in focus, but that's really not a bad thing. You don't have a cluttered or a noisy or dirty background to make smooth in a lot of situations that I was shooting recently. So that extra depth of field is the problem. But now you get the birds up against this background of trees and bushes, and now you can see that that extra depth of field is bringing those elements of the background much more into focus. Do you like that? Maybe you do. If you like that look and it's not a problem to you, then the 800 f11 is producing a background bokeh or whatever you want to call it that is okay for you, then great. A lot of people love that really milky, that smooth background behind their subjects because it just separates them out even more. Subject photography, bringing that subject out to the forefront, tack sharp, can be what you're after, and so it's going to be much harder to do with the f11 on that 800 millimeter. But again, it just depends on what types of scenarios you shoot in, what types of shooting you're doing, whether you're going to be happy with what the 800 f11 can produce versus something like the 600 f4 with a 1.4 times teleconverter on it to get you at 840 millimeters. So there's not really a need to belabor this. It's more like so many things in photography, a personal preference, what you can afford, what you like your images to look like, what you're trying to create. Will the lens allow you to create what you're trying to create? Of course, you have much more flexibility with the 600 f4. You can shoot some images of these swallowtail kites at f5.6, keep that milky background, stop way down, get to f11 if you want to equal or f13 even to equal, because it's a little more focal length there. The 800 f11, so when they're shooting them on the water, you get that extra depth of field on the bird, you get them all in focus. Absolutely, much more flexibility with the 600 f4, but again, weighing in price, image quality overall being very, very good on a less than $1,000 lens, the 800 millimeter f11. So again, it's just all of these factors that the individual photographer needs to weigh and see what they want to go with as far as these lenses. But again, this is not, I don't mean this video to be a direct comparison one versus the other. I just wanted to provide some more data for people, some more images for people to look at, comparing the 800 f11 to the 600 f4 with the 1.4 times teleconverter, so they can see what the differences are, and so they can make a more informed decision about how important it might be for for them to save their money to try to get a 600 f4 moving forward, or if they might be just satisfied with an 800 f11. So anyway, I hope you found some of this at least informative to you, and if you did, please subscribe. It's always nice to get additional subscribers to my YouTube channel, as that's what keeps me going and being able to provide videos like this one. And so until next time, be safe, get out there, take some great images, and I hope you have great light. See you soon.